Well, hello and welcome. Welcome to Around the Town with Mark. I am Mark Whalen, your host, and we're always glad to have you tune in and visit with us. Well, we are very fortunate here in Southeast Connecticut to have so many varied, wonderful things to see and to do. My guest today is representing one organization that represents lots and lots and lots of these fun and wonderful things to do, and she's going to start talking today about their upcoming winter season. So allow me to introduce Deborah Donovan with the Thames River Heritage Park. Deborah, welcome to Around the Town with Mark.
Thank you. It's nice to be here, Mark.
Well, it's wonderful to have you here today. So please introduce yourself to our guests and tell us a little bit about who and what you do.
Okay, I'll start with saying that my relationship with the Thames River Heritage Park came about when I was asked to join the planning group at least 12 or 13 years ago for creating a virtual park in the Groton, New London area that would encompass all the wonderful historic sites and art and cultural organizations. So we could work together in preserving our history, but also marketing it to a wider audience. And that brings me back to me, because I was born in Connecticut, in Bristol, which is in northwestern Connecticut on the opposite end of the state. And I've lived in other places, but when I moved back to Connecticut in 1998, I came to New London to work for the tourism district. And I was absolutely shocked at how much history there was in this area that I, as a Connecticut-born and raised person, knew absolutely nothing about it.
Oh, I see.
Now, I went to grammar school and high school in Connecticut, and I never heard of the Battle of Groton Heights.
Oh, my
which
goodness.
just gives you an idea of what's going on in the schools.
Yes, exactly.
Or was going on in the schools a while ago, just say a while ago.
Oh.
So I moved back here in 1998, and I kind of automatically did a deep dive into this because I've always been interested in history, even though it's not my career, was not my career. And when I was asked to join this planning group, I was really excited about it. And we finally got the Thames River Heritage Park established through a state legislative act. It's an actual state park. I shouldn't say it's actual, it's virtual. It's a virtual state park.
Yeah, to be clear, it's an organization that encompasses lots of parks. So Thames River Heritage Park itself is not a place to go, but it represents lots of other places.
That's right. It's like a bubble with all these different places inside of it.
Yeah.
It's sort of similar to what they have in New York State, which used to be called urban cultural parks and are now called heritage areas. And the state of New York has always grouped small pieces of communities or whole communities by historic themes relevant to their place, and worked to get all the individual heritage and arts groups and private businesses within those areas to work together in planning events, marketing themselves as an idea, as a story, one of the stories of New York State. This is what the Thames River Heritage Park does. It actually could be a model for other areas in the state of Connecticut to do the same thing. Our slogan is, "One river, 1,000 stories." And we have actually quite more than 1,000 stories here in the Thames River Basin. And at this point, the Thames River Heritage Park covers Groton and New London, but there is possibilities for expanding it up the river. And I know a lot of people further up the river would like that to happen. And so it probably will one day.
And let me mention, while you're talking about that, that what's included in this is actually the river itself.
The river itself.
And the water taxi that you have back and forth between here and London and various points.
Yes. The river is it's sort of the lifeblood of the area, and always has been. It's like a tree. It's like the trunk of a tree with all these tributaries to the north, and starting from the time John Winthrop established New London and Groton. Trade and has flowed down all those rivers, agricultural goods. It's just an amazing, it's an amazing small river, really.
And it includes the
Right.
sub-base.
It includes tons of
Coast
military
Guard
history
and the train
yes.
station and the ferry boats and
Right.
so many things.
So the Thames River Heritage Park has, I actually have a little map here, which kind of shows you the main pieces of it, but it also lists all the sites that are part of this and more to come.
Now, where would somebody be able to obtain this brochure?
We reprint this just about every year as things evolve,
Okay.
and it's widely available in
All your different sites?
different sites around hotels and
okay, very good.
down on the City Pier in London, where
Oh,
that little
excellent.
building is. We have a rack,
Yep.
and in all of our sites. Over here in Groton, Fort Griswold is obviously the big site,
Yep.
but there's also the Avery Copp House and the museum associated with Fort Griswold,
And the library,
the
of course.
library,
Bill
the Ebenezer
Library.
Avery House, the sub-base in the Submarine Museum,
Yep.
and the Submarine Memorial that's right there as you come down Bridge Street.
Yep.
So and Avery Point itself, the campus there is not exactly a part of it, but we work very closely with them on developing walking tours, coordinating their Blue Highway project, which identifies maritime sites around the area, and the environmental aspect of the river, which is something that is less critical in a way to what we do, which is more history, but the environmental story of the river is very fascinating too. And we do work closely with the Mohegan Tribal Council and their education department, because the environmental part of the river's story is very basic to the story of the Mohegan tribe.
Okay.
So that's basically how the park is put together. It's kind of nebulous, and a lot of people just sort of like, oh, really? Oh, okay. But it's been pretty successful, this collaboration, so far.
Good.
So far, so good. It's great. We have 3 boats, the New London, the Groton, and the Namiog,
All right.
which was historically the Native American name for the river.
Oh, okay. That's a nice
One
little,
of the
That's a nice
names,
little
I should
tidbit
say.
to know. Yeah.
And the boats are Navy surplus boats, and many people in the area have probably seen them out on the river. We do a water taxi that loops around during the summer on the weekends, so people can get on it in Groton and come over to New London to visit, say, Fort Trumbull, or downtown in the Hempstead houses, the Shaw Mansion, the Nathan Hill Schoolhouse, the Custom House, and then go back over to Groton, walk up that daunting hill, and visit Fort Griswold.
Yep.
So the water taxi runs on a schedule. We also use those boats to do harbor tours with themes. We have some really wonderful people from the Mohegan tribe who do the Native American indigenous story, and they bring all kinds of show and tell kind of stuff, which is
Wonderful.
very helpful. We have a military history tour, submarine tour. We have a Revolutionary War tour. That goes back to my never knowing about the Revolutionary War role that this area played.
And it was a very big role that a
It was
lot
huge.
of people don't understand.
It was huge.
Yes.
I mean, it's not just the Battle of Fort Griswold, but and the burning of New London.
Burning of New London.
But the Nathaniel Shaw was assigned the role of running the privateer fleet out of New London.
Okay.
Made him a very wealthy man, by the way, but it also was huge. The British referred to this area as the Den of Vipers.
Oh, really?
Because of all these little ships that were scooting around Long Island Sound, sinking and capturing British shipping. In fact, the Shaw Mansion has artifacts, tables and silver and flags and
Wonderful.
stuff that were, seized.
Oh, wow. Yes.
And of course, when the British attacked New London and Groton in 1781, it was partly in revenge for this activity.
Oh, was it? Okay.
And to recover some of their ships, which were anchored here. But alas, when they set everything on fire, that was the end of all their ships. So
Yeah.
too bad for that. So
So
anyway, our
that's-
boats, we do the tours. We also have walking tours. We coordinate events amongst our partner sites, and we hope to coordinate more events as time goes by. But then comes the winter, of course, and the boats are not running around, and people are not out walking, bundled up looking at historic sites necessarily.
Right.
And of course, some museums are closed in the wintertime. So we do a couple of things in the winter. We've started doing a couple of things to overcome that lack of activity. And one is a lecture series, which started, it started before 2020,
Oh, okay.
but it was not terribly well attended because it was winter. I think people don't like to go out and about in the wintertime.
They're not usually looking for
That's
that
right.
kind of thing to do, and they don't usually have family visiting
Right.
like they do in the summer.
So when COVID struck, we were like, oh no, now what do we do? But thank you, Zoom. We decided to do a lecture series and put it on Zoom and put the word out there. And actually, our attendance at those Zoom lectures was astonishingly high, and it came from all over Connecticut, which was great. It was totally unexpected. And we themed that first lecture series to visions of the Thames River Basin, as it were. What have people thought about this area from the beginning? And we kicked it off with Walt Woodward, who's the former state historian and is really fun and interesting speaker. And we included what's the vision for the state pier? What was the vision of the African American population here who were enslaved early on, who encompassed a lot of freed black people during, before, and after the Civil War. And there's a huge black heritage story in this area. And I'm trying to think of some of the other visions we had. We had a vision for the cultural story and for the military story, the submarine story,
Sure.
because that was a visionary thing. So that was our first. Last year we went hybrid because of things calming down with COVID.
Sure.
And we did books about the area, fiction and nonfiction books. We contacted a number of authors who'd written about stories about this area.
Wonderful.
And they each spoke, sold their books, talked about their books, and that was pretty successful. When we went to a hybrid situation, we partnered with the Lyman Allen Art Museum in New London.
All right.
They have a nice little meeting room, and they have a very good AV set up so that we could do the Zoom and do it in person as well. And it's been great because Lyman Allen is a beautiful place. We have a reception at the beginning in the library there, which is included in the cost of the lecture, and then people go to the room and they have their lecture and they get to ask questions, and that was
Wonderful.
really successful too.
Wonderful.
Now we're not getting as many people from away from the area, of course, now that it's not fully Zoomed, but
Sure.
I think we can change that maybe. So this year, we were like, our program committee was having a difficult time coming up with a theme. And thanks to Connecticut Explored, which is a monthly, it's not monthly, I guess it's bi-monthly magazine that is published in cooperation with Connecticut Humanities Council.
Okay.
In August, I was reading it, and I'm like, oh my gosh. It was all about islands, and Connecticut islands, and people in Connecticut going to islands, and people from islands coming to Connecticut, and I thought,
Okay.
we could do islands. Because one of the main stories of this area, this particular part of Connecticut, is how cosmopolitan it is and always has been, primarily due to the fact that it's been based on trade. Life here was based on trade from the beginning with Europe, with the Caribbean, later with Hawaii,
Okay.
with South America, and then when the military presence evolved, it expanded the horizons, really, of people who live here and work on submarines and travel all over the world.
Surely.
So, and end up living here.
Yeah.
You know, whaling ships came back to this area with people from Hawaii, who they called Kanakas. It was always Charlie Kanaka and Joe Kanaka. And
Okay.
so on. And from the Cape Verdes, the Azores, any place they could pick up young men willing to do nasty jobs.
Sure.
Basically.
That was a tough life.
It was.
Yeah.
And they got out whaling or sealing, and they came back and they stayed. So and the trade with the West Indies was also very rich and evolved over time until the Revolutionary War, which kind of put the kibosh on that.
Sure.
So we decided to do island connections. How are we connected to islands, and what islands should we pick?
Okay.
So we picked 5 islands.
All right.
Long Island.
Okay. A good neighbor.
Long Island is a good neighbor, and there's been tons of connections, family connections, kinship connections between New London, Groton, and Long Island since colonial times.
Okay.
You can read all about it in Joshua Hempstead's diary. Of course, I never heard of Joshua Hempstead till I moved here either. Now I feel like he's an old friend. But there was a lot of back and forth between Long Island and this area throughout the colonial period. And during the Revolutionary War, when Long Island tended to be more loyalist, Connecticut not so much, there was some movement of families back and forth. And of course now we're still connected to Long Island vis-a-vis Crosstown Ferry, which,
yep.
you know, there's tons of traffic that's both people and goods moving back and forth with Long Island. So Pat Schaefer, who's a historian and an expert on Joshua Hempstead's diary, is going to talk about that.
Oh, great.
We have Matt Warschauer, who is a professor at Connecticut College State University and knows a lot about the West Indian trade. And he's going to talk about that with specific reference to the fact that's often left out of the story, which is not only was Connecticut the largest, basically, trading port, bigger than Boston, with the West Indies, and it all came through New London. Horses, agricultural products, lumber, wood for casks, for molasses, all the things not available on the Caribbean islands, which were so devoted to sugar production, Barbados and Jamaica and those places,
Yep.
that they couldn't grow their own food. There was no land to do it, and they went through horses. They overworked horses, obviously, and livestock to eat. So that was huge trade. But the piece of the trade that we all sort of put aside for a long, long time was the slave trade, which also was there. You know, Native American tribal members, after the Pequot Wars, were sold into slavery on the Caribbean islands.
Oh, really? Okay.
Africans who had been brought to the Caribbean islands were oftentimes traded here. And so there's that kind of icky, not well known and not something to be proud of part of the trade, but there is a lot to be proud of in that trade.
It's an important part of
It's definitely an important part of the
community
trade.
and what helped it develop.
Yep, and then there's all the goods that were shipped and the goods that came back that were not human goods, the sugar, the molasses, the rum. So that's a really entwined story, and it's very interesting. It's a lot of the islands down there, primarily the British West Indies. But when the Revolutionary War happened, the British, there was no more trade with the British West Indies.
Sure,
Legal
right.
trade, anyway.
Right.
There was some illegal trade. So and the British sort of blockaded it all down there. We have then Hawaii. And Hawaii was a huge whaling destination, the destination for whalers, all New England whalers really, especially as the whales got more difficult to find in the Pacific Ocean. So the fleets would go out there. They actually would go mostly to Lahaina,
Okay.
which we know about from the fires that happened there recently, because there was a lot of talk about that. So the whalers would park themselves there, leave off their wives, provision their ships, and go off to the Arctic and go off to the Western Pacific and then come back to Hawaii. And they'd be transshipping oil back and forth too. So there's a lot of stories about our connection with Hawaii and with Lahaina. And as it happens, the New London County Historical Society has lots of very interesting artifacts from there. Because Elias Perkins, who was part owner of a whaling firm, was the consul to Hawaii. He was named consul to Hawaii by Abraham Lincoln and spent some years in Lahaina managing his company's interests there, but also being the consul. And he brought back stuff, like we all do. He brought back souvenirs to New London, and there they sit.
Wonderful.
Steve,
just treasures.
oh yeah, and Steve Manuel, who's the executive director of the Historic Society, is going to bring some of them to the Lyman Allen for us to look at.
That's wonderful. That's very exciting.
Yeah, I think that's...
People love to be able not to just listen, but to see and
see and touch. It's, no touching.
No touching, but
no
get to
touching.
see.
Yeah, but so that's another one. And then we have one called Bound for Desolation, and that's me. The Desolation Islands were sub-Antarctic islands in the Southern Oceans, which is the Southern Indian Ocean, really. And from about late 1840s until 1881, New London whalers not only whaled down there, but they hunted elephant seals, which are these huge, ginormous seals that they're not fur seals. They have fat on them that's just like whale fat, blubber.
Okay, right.
And they made a very fine oil. And somebody that I know recently sent me a little note about a paper I had written about this, and he said, "It's extraordinary how quickly such a complex operation was started so soon after Heard," that's one of the island's discovery. "The 19th century was not short of entrepreneurs or their energetic and resourceful agents. The seals and whales didn't stand a chance."
Oh.
And of course, that's what we had here. We had entrepreneurial people, many of whom were whalers. We had lots of whaling firms in Groton and New London and whaling captains, and they went off puttering around catching whales. But it wasn't too long before they realized that there was not an easier way necessarily, but a more efficient way of doing this business. And so that's what we're going to talk about.
Good, excellent.
And we're going to kick off our party with in January with Jeff Kaufman, who's a wonderful shanty man, formerly with Mystic Seaport, and a musician. And he's going to tell us some stories about all these island places and sing songs
Really?
related to them all. He's got a great repertoire of stuff he's putting together.
Wow, this is exciting.
And then we're going to end it with a field trip to Fisher's Island. Fisher's Island is our last island. It's that mysterious little island out there that is no longer part of Connecticut, but still has a Connecticut zip code.
Oh, does it really? Okay, that's interesting.
So go figure. I
had no idea.
Yeah, and it's a wonderful place, really, and has lots of ties to this area. So we're going to have it'll be June, and we'll take the boat out and have a nice day on Fisher's Island.
That's exciting.
So that's our thing. The other thing we do, just briefly in the wintertime, and we've done it now for 3 years, I believe, is our Docent Academy, which is a several-month training program for people who want to be docents or otherwise volunteer at our historic sites. We show them all the sites, we tell them all the stories, we give them training in public speaking and in dealing with visitors, especially visitors who are handicapped in one way or another, children.
Sure.
And it's a really rich program, and we've gotten lots and lots of new volunteers for our historic sites and our art museums and art centers in the last few years. And we're going to keep that up because it's a really
Wonderful.
great program.
Yeah. I'm sure you rely a lot on having volunteer base.
And people
help
want to
you.
volunteer, but they just don't know how to do it, or they don't know who needs them. But
Right.
we tell them, this is who needs you, and this is how to
Wonderful.
do it, and come on, sign
Wonderful.
up.
Now, information on all this, we can see it on the screen.
ThamesRiverHeritagePark.org.
Everyone write that down, and you can go on to that site and purchase.
You can go onto that site and purchase tickets.
tickets.
We had a season pass available, but yesterday was the last day to buy it.
Okay.
But you can buy tickets to individual programs starting in January.
Okay.
That first one in January, which will be the 3rd of January.
Okay. So they can start. They can buy the tickets now, but the program starts in January.
Right, and really they need, if they're interested in any or all of these, they need to buy their tickets early because
Okay.
space is not, expansive at the auditorium, and we sold out a couple of lectures last year.
Did you? Oh,
And,
wonderful.
and people
Well,
just showed up, and fire laws, we couldn't let them in.
well, that is the name of the game.
Right. Now, they will be available
Let's do what you
on
want.
YouTube after the whole program is over. Well,
Okay.
the trip to Fisher's Island won't be on YouTube.
Okay.
But the rest of them will be on YouTube. And so if you can't get in the door, then that's an option. But we'd love to see people there because we want
Certainly.
the interaction. And we want people to ask questions.
Absolutely. Absolutely, because you can grow yourself by hearing what the
Yes.
people want to know
Yes.
and from the questions they
Yep.
ask and that type of thing.
Yep,
So
exactly.
that's wonderful. Well, we're down to our last couple of minutes. Is there some other things about your site or contact that you'd like to share with us?
I would just like to say that I hope that people in the area learn as much as they can about the park and take a look at the site and come out in the summertime and bring friends and take a little ride around. There are people in this area who've never been on the river because they don't have a boat.
Sure.
This is your chance.
It's available to you. You can do that.
You can buy your ticket and ride around all day if you want, but we also, of course, want you to get off at these 3 stops and go see our wonderful historic sites and hear the stories of the people who came before us and the people who are still here now. Really, it's this part of the world is so wonderful, and I think it's the most interesting part of Connecticut.
Wonderful.
Honestly, and we need to be proud of it, and we need to learn about it.
Well, Deborah, I want to thank you so much for being my guest today and sharing all the wonderful things about Thames River Heritage Park and, of course, your upcoming lecture series. So thank you so much for sharing with
You're
that.
very welcome. I hope to see lots of people there.
All right. Well, everybody.
Including you, Mark.
I will, definitely. So everybody, please put this information, write all this down. Of course, you can watch us on TV, watch us on YouTube, and hear all about this program yet again. ThamesRiverHeritagePark.org. Volunteer, make reservations, come out and visit all these wonderful sites. Also, come here and visit SEC TV Studios. It is also an art gallery. You're always welcome to come in and look and buy some of this wonderful art. It all goes, most of the proceeds go back into the nonprofit SEC TV Studios. So please come on in and take a look. I want to thank you for tuning in with the Round to Town with Mark, and we're going to see you again very soon. Thank you.